Every once in a while I come across a couple of cases that are extremely interesting but aren't quite long enough to gain their own video. In this series I plan to go over those shorter cases and hopefully you find them as interesting as I did. First, I'd like to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, Honeygain. In this day and age, we're always paying out those microtransactions here and there. Netflix, Hulu, maybe Disney Plus or something, video game subscriptions, YouTube Premium, maybe? All that good stuff. Maybe you want to pay for some in-game skins and items. Well, that's where Honeygain comes in. All you need to do is install Honeygain on your device and that's it. You're making money just by sharing your internet connection. You can even connect all of your devices and get a couple going at once. Your internet connection is used by businesses to retrieve various info from around the internet, like information about prices. As prices for goods online can differ based on location, websites connect to Honeygain's network and get the best deal possible throughout the millions of users that are connected. So with the help of its users and infrastructure, everyone, even you, can benefit from it. It helps people find the best prices for anything from new shoes to even a plane ticket, when the pandemic is over anyway. Whenever you have $20, you can withdraw your money to PayPal or choose Bitcoin payment. It's super easy. So why wait? You can go ahead and use my code DYER when signing up, or just click that link in the description down below to get started and enjoy the first free $5 added to your account. When imagining one of the worst, most humiliating ways to lose my life, being sat on by a 69-year-old, 320-pound-old woman would have never come to mind. Well, unfortunately, a little girl did succumb to this as a form of discipline. This case is one of the weirder ones. It took place in Pensacola, Florida in 2017. Here we had an absolute mess of a family. The family consisted of two parents, Grace Jones Smith, age 69, James Edmund Smith, age unknown, and their two adopted daughters. One of these daughters was Derica Lindsay, who was only 9 years old. Friends and parents of friends described her as a bubbly, cheerful girl who was always polite towards them.
A lot of people loved Derica. She had a happy smile on her face, and she would always come up to me at school and any other parent there and go, "Hi, Mrs. Bellis," and give a big hug and a big kiss. And she was just so affectionate.
Unfortunately, despite being such a nice girl, her adopted parents were garbage and lived in a situation that reflected this. The house was a small shack and was equipped with no air conditioning despite the harsh, hot Florida weather. Derica and her sister slept on a brown, moldy mattress with no bedding each night. Derica and her sister would try to stay with friends as often as possible, and on at least one occasion had run away to a friend's home. Derica cried and refused to go home, but unfortunately her parents came and took them back into their custody. One fateful day playing at home, Derica was getting quite rowdy. Her mother, Grace, didn't really want to deal with the girls, so she called in the big guns. Enter Grace's niece, Veronica Posey, Derica's adopted cousin. She was awoken in the afternoon by Grace's call. Grace begged Posey to come over and help discipline the child. Posey pulled herself out of bed and went over to the family home. She took it upon herself to begin hitting poor Derica. She started off by smacking her with a ruler, but eventually upped the ante by striking her with a metal pipe. Derica retreated to an armchair on the other side of the room, but Posey once again approached her. Posey forced Derica down onto her chest on the seat and then decided to punish her further by sitting on her back. Now let's take a moment to describe Posey here. Posey was 64 years old and weighed a whopping 325 pounds, or 150 kilograms. She wasn't exactly known for being too clean either. Derica, on the other hand, barely weighed 100 pounds herself. She crushed Derica under all of her weight. Derica screamed in pain, but Posey told her to shut up. Derica's body went completely limp. She continued sitting on her for 10 minutes as Derica attempted to scream, but couldn't get the oxygen to do so. She told Posey quietly, "I can't breathe." Posey didn't care. She told her to shut up and to quit faking it. She sat on her for a further 2 minutes when she noticed that Derica had stopped struggling and gone completely silent. She heaved herself up from off the chair to look down and see that Derica... The mother, Grace, soon called 911 as Posey began to attempt CPR to no avail. The paramedics soon arrived and did their best to revive Derica, but eventually she was transported to the nearby Baptist hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Posey, Grace, and James were all arrested and taken into custody. Grace Smith was charged with aggravated manslaughter, child abuse, and child neglect. James was similarly charged with child neglect as well. Veronica Posey was charged with first-degree felony murder, which held a mandatory life sentence, along with aggravated child abuse. Mike Carroll, the Secretary of the Florida Department of Children and Families, called the case appalling. He was determined to hold the family accountable. The family had previously had issues with the child welfare system in the past. In fact, the police had been called out to the home multiple times on related issues, several times in the last 18 months leading up to the incident alone. As the family has a prior interaction with the child welfare system, a thorough quality assurance review will be conducted to review all prior interactions this family has had with the child welfare system, said a statement issued by the department. An autopsy was performed on Derica as well, and it did not take long to see that this was definitely not her first time being struck by the family. She had what they called injuries upon injuries. Grace soon admitted to making the marks herself. It is believed that James isn't all that innocent himself either. Grace was given a bond of $75,000. James was given a bond of $50,000. Neither of them were able to pay and instead remained in police custody. Posey was given a $125,000 bond and somehow was able to get released. Nobody in the family had an attorney. Disgusted at the ordeal, Judge Jan Shackelford was able to get Posey taken back into custody, where she was held without bond this time. A funeral was held for Derica, which was mostly attended by her friends and their parents. As per usual, the trials were pretty lengthy, but not quite as bad as usual. James Smith's trial came first and continued without much issue. He pled no contest for aggravated manslaughter of a child. Eventually, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, where he remains locked up to this day. Grace Smith's case found itself to be much more complicated. Early on, she was found to be both mentally and physically unfit for trial, unsurprisingly, as some might say, given her history. She still faced charges of manslaughter and child abuse, but the trial had to be put on hold for the time being. She was placed into a mental facility. Throughout the trials, friends of Derica and her friends' parents were saddened to see that she was unceremoniously buried in an unmarked grave. They decided that they would begin taking donations with the goal of buying a headstone for her. After a while, they were successful and raised enough money to buy one. Now she at least has a marker to memorialize her. They felt it was the least they could do. Grace Smith was later released from the mental facility in which she was being held, finally being found fit and competent enough to stand trial, and was taken back to jail. She was ultimately charged with negligent manslaughter, child neglect, and cruelty to a child. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Being over 70 years old, it may as well be a life sentence for her. And now we finally get to Veronica Green Posey. Her trial came later in 2019. After deliberating upon the evidence for only 5 hours, the jury found her guilty of first-degree murder. In March of 2019, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. During her sentencing, she said that she never intended to hurt the little girl, seemingly forgetting about having hit her with a metal pipe, and stated that she merely wanted to help the Smiths out. Nothing more. Her attorney wasn't really happy with the results of this case and vowed to go down other avenues to find a way to get the sentencing overturned.
That we're respectful of the jury's verdict, however we disagree with it. I do not believe my client was guilty, and she's going to be looking at all avenues of appeal when I meet with her on Monday.
He made a solid attempt, but the conviction was upheld in 2020. Posey isn't going anywhere. She continues to rot in prison to this day, along with Grace and James, who will all likely never see life outside bars again. Also in 2017, a man was arrested in Palm Beach, Florida after a strange series of events. Timothy Joseph Rice, who was 19 at the time, was a strange young man. He has a vague, unspecified set of beliefs that tended to creep out those around him. He had one belief that he made clear to others, though. He had energy in his hands. What does this energy do, you ask? Well, according to the man himself, it has the power to turn girls into women. I'm not really sure what that means either. Timothy picked an attractive girl on campus, one he found sitting alone, minding her own business. Timothy sat down next to her and told her, "I want to make love to you," multiple times, using language much more explicit than I just did. He started touching her, so she slapped him. Then he gave up and moved along. Just kidding. He kept touching her and in turn getting slapped, over and over again. Multiple times, in fact. He told this, most likely adult-aged college student, that he would use his hands to turn her from a girl into a real woman. And not in a bedroom sort of way, in a transformative energy sort of way. Given that this poor girl had no idea who he was and had been touched multiple times despite hitting him, she got up to run away. He stood up and grabbed her. She was able to struggle and get away when she then called the police as soon as she could. The armed campus police arrived and held Rice at the scene of the crime. The police soon arrived then and arrested him for battery. He flat out told them that he'd planned on using his hand energy beams to turn that girl into a woman and that he merely wanted to make love with her. He said that he was actually trying to help her. He obviously didn't understand even basic social norms. He was jailed in Brevard County Jail Complex. He stayed there until November when the case was dismissed after his hearing. He has since continued to get arrested for DUIs, possession, and drug use charges. In 2016, a then-teenage couple, Kyle Scholta and Remy Riley, were driving through Miccosukee, Florida, on their way from Tampa to Fort Lauderdale to go to a concert. The driver, Kyle, had ran a stop sign after getting some gas when a police officer, Michael Martinez, noticed and pulled them over. When he pulled them over, he found both alcohol and marijuana in the car. Naturally, the two felt that they were going to be ticketed or even arrested. However, things didn't really go that way. They got weird. Martinez actually asked the couple to follow him to a remote area down the road. Being that he was a police officer and the two were already in trouble, the couple complied. In fact, Martinez told them that they would be going straight to jail if they didn't follow him. Much to their shock, he told the two then 18-year-olds if they were to strip naked and run down the street in front of him, that he would let them off the hook. Kyle pretty quickly went along with the order, stripped down, and started running down the road. Remy, however, was obviously very uncomfortable with the request. She had stripped down to her underwear, hoping that would be enough. It wasn't. Martinez threatened her and pushed her to take off the rest of her clothes. During the process, he even demanded that she perform an action on him with her hand. She took off the rest of her clothes, but refused to comply with his demand to use her hand. She ran down the road, using her hands to cover herself, when Martinez ordered her to move her hands so that he could see. After the incident, it's not really clear who, but someone went on to report it. Martinez immediately went under investigation, and despite having already been on parole at his current job, he wasn't fired for a full year into the investigation. In 2018, he was arrested for extortion. 3 years later, in 2019, the case finally went to trial and the two victims were finally able to tell their stories and give their testimonies.
I was given a choice to go to jail or run, so I took the choice to run naked.
Of course I felt scared.
You feel intimidated?
Of course I felt intimidated. I took my pants off, I took my shirt off. I kind of looked at him like, is this enough? You know, he's like, that's it? I turned around from them, I turned away. I took my underwear off, I took my bra off. Not what I wanted to do. I felt like I had no choice. At 18 years old, I don't feel like you should know what to do. I felt like that was his job.
Martinez's lawyer's base defense was that it wouldn't make sense to do this in broad daylight. It would have made more sense to take them into the woods or something. So the two teens must have been lying.
He took them to a place, broad daylight, in public, where anybody can drive around to do this illegal thing? Look at the overgrowth here, look at the woods. He could have had them go off anywhere if he was going to do this terrible thing.
It didn't really cut it. The rough testimonies from the two, now adults, were enough to convict Martinez. He was found guilty on 2 counts of extortion and 2 counts of unlawful compensation. He appealed multiple times, but he failed every appeal, and he was finally sentenced to 10 years in prison, where he is today. Thank you again for watching my videos. I hope you found it interesting. If you don't mind, leaving a like really helps the video to get seen by others, and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more cases like this. If you'd like, I do have a Patreon, and you could support the channel on there. Speaking of which, a special shout out to my current top tier patrons: Kim Peak, Lux Alpaca, Charity, Skooky Maine, Foxlicity, Jackie, Lavender Wise, Brittany Marchbanks, and Toy King 10. Once again, thank you guys, you are the best. Once again, shout out to Honeygain for sponsoring this episode. Good night, and thanks for watching.